Akbikesh, Mukhtarova. And land commissions in Kazakhstan as a topic. So Akbikesh.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr.
You're free to start.
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Then I should start. So, so thank you so much. So my presentation is on land commissions in Kazakhstan, and just to make you a brief overview that these are institutions that are functioning under local municipalities in Kazakhstan. And just a bit of prehistory. So as you may know, so Kazakhstan is the 9th largest country in the world by its land area. But as many developing countries, our country is also experiencing some problems in land governance related to opaque systems, sometimes not quite clear to the population system of land granting. And this problem was raised not only by the state officials, but also by the population. And during the land protest in 2016 in major cities of Kazakhstan, among many other issues, protesters raised their concerns over the different problems, socioeconomic problems, lack of access to land, growing land inequality in the country, corruption in the land sector. And in 2016, after land protests, the government made one step forward, so to say, and created a platform for dialogue between civil society and the state authorities. And during this dialogue, important amendments to the land code were imposed, and one of them was the inclusion of the civil society component to local municipalities and creation of some kind of institutions, the land commissions. And so just to explain to you, before 2016, land code granted large competences to local mayors, as you may see here, in granting land plots, in size land plots, and making state control of the use of land. After the land protests and so after amendments to the land code, such institutions as the collegial bodies, as the land commissions were created, which on 50% should comprise of state authorities and on 50% from civil society. And during the first day of our conference, we discussed that the notion of civil society is quite broad, but in general, in the land code, it's mentioned by the civil society is understood representatives, you may see here in green, representatives of public councils, NGOs, and National Chamber of Entrepreneurs, and some of the representatives of local population. And so inclusion of the civil society component, it was expected to make this process, I mean, land allocation process more kind of transparent, accountable, and inclusive. However, some recent corruption scandals also in some of the regions of Kazakhstan with the involvement of, unfortunately, some members of the Land Commission raised concern in population and expert community wherever, in general, this institution as Land Commission with the civil society engagement is effective. And probably in the near future, state authorities discussing the issue that maybe by 2023, these institutions will stop functioning. And for me as a researcher, it's just interesting why, I mean, like, although civil society component was included to land governance, it didn't bring, so to say, didn't turn to institutional changes. And here you see some research questions. So why were land commissions created? Has the inclusion of civil society improved the effectiveness of land commissions? And most importantly, what conditions facilitated success, or in our case, underperformance of these newly established institutions? In terms of theoretical frameworks, I'm going to analyze the problem from the perspective of general institutional changes studies by applying two theoretical models related to policy and institutional change. One of them is a subsystem adjustment model of policy change developed by Professors Howlett and Ramesh in 2012, and complementary strategic interaction model of institutional change, which is developed by Professor Stapelhurst and Professor Pelitso. Since we're a bit limited in time, I think we, I mean, like, if you will have questions regarding the theory, I can.
It was Pelitso and Stapelhurst. It was not Stapelhurst and
Yeah. Yep. Thank you so much for the correction. And since we're a bit limited in time, I think I will switch to the relevance of the work, methodology, and some preliminary findings, because I think for the audience it will be more interesting. In terms of gaps in the literature, in general, such kind of institutions as land commissions, they are functioning in different contexts. In Latin America, they have land pastoral commissions, in sub-Saharan Africa, and even European, in some of the European countries. But in general, you see that in academic literature, some lack of scholarly works capturing the work of these institutions as a platform for dialogue, so to say, between state authorities and civil society. Also, we see a lack of scholarly works analyzing the role of civil society as a potential driver of institutional changes, although we have it, of course, works are developed by our GSPP professors like Professor Knox and many others, Professor Janeno. But in general, if we take a land governance system, here we see some lacks of scholarly works, in particular related to studies of land corruption and accountability studies in land governance. In terms of methodology, I'm going to analyze the problem using mainly qualitative methods, considering the work of land commissions in 4 regions of Kazakhstan, as well as conducting expert and elite interviews with both international and national experts. Here, if we, like one chapter, I decided to study international experience, and here you see that I contacted more than 30 international experts and managed to conduct interviews with 21 of them. Here on the map, you see with the red indicated location of the experts. So I tried to interview experts working absolutely in different contexts in Australia, Latin America, Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa, European countries. So most of them, they're working for such authoritative organizations as UN Habitat, International Land Coalition, Oxfam, and many others. So the overall response rate of international experts is quite high. And just to switch to the main findings, from these interview results with international experts, they're mentioning, of course, that the problem of civil society engagement to land governance is complex because there's no one size fits all approach should be adopted in relation to different countries. For instance, if we are taking land commissions in Latin America or Brazil, in comparison to Central Asia, they have more, certainly more strong grassroots organizations and different actors. For instance, their land commissions were created not by the state authorities, but by different actors. For instance, even Communist Party in the 60s, and some of them created, for instance, land pastoral commissions by religious organizations like a Catholic Church. In terms of Africa, they have mainly customer tenure regimes, and here's a complex mix of, for instance, this traditional and kind of modern land tenure regimes and when we talk about community or civil society engagement, we should take into account the role of the tribal leaders and some other forms of community engagement. In general, since I would like to move to Kazakhstan more, but all international experts, of course, mentioned the problem of civil society engagement in different contexts, but they mentioned that it's essential to pay attention not to the state and civil society interaction, but rather to the problem wherever civil society represents the interest of the local population. And the more emphasis should be paid on interaction between local population and so-called civil society. In terms of Kazakhstan, yes, as I said, I'm applying revelatory multiple cross-sectional case study design and analyzing the work of land commissions in 4 regions. Here you see that I try to cover different and south of the country. Since the topic is a bit sensitive related to land issues, I should honestly admit that the response rate is quite low, but in general, I managed to interview heads of the land departments at the regional and district levels. Here with in green color, you see which regions were more responsive. I also interviewed the civil society component of land commissions, but in general, so not to take much of your time, I just should say that each of the actors who are engaged in the work of land commissions, they as underlined that in the current form and in current design, unfortunately, the land commissions are ineffective. For instance, state authorities, they mentioned the problem that they feel the pressure both from the side of the state and society, and that media, although media institutions, but in general, there's no much communication and back communication between the top official, senior official, and local municipality managers. In particular, this holds true for village and district levels. And there they said that although civil society component was included, but they don't bear any responsibility towards the decisions, and that is why, and of course it's difficult to collect the quorum. And if we talk about the village, for instance, it's difficult to collect the civil society component because they don't have representatives of academia there, agribusiness, National Chamber of Entrepreneurs is also not always presented. As to civil society component, each component, I mean, representatives of business community mentioned that they are not capable to attend land commission sessions because they have own kind of obligations related to business. Academia mentioned that although they have studied a lot with issues related to land governance, they usually not being invited, and in general mentioned this lack of communication between academia and decision makers in land governance. And in general, all of them mentioned that civil society at this point is not very well presented because they are not representing the interest of the local population, not because they don't want it, but because they are lacking mechanisms. And in general also that all experts mentioned the importance of preparing public policy analysts in land governance. So not legal experts, not economic experts, but to pay attention to preparation of experts in land governance. And I think if this is the dimension which is more interested for us in terms of public policy analysis. So thank you so much. These are just preliminary results, and if you have questions, I will be really respond to all of them.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. And now we have some time for questions.
So maybe I could kick off if I may, Simeon.
Yes, yes.
So thank you very much, Akbikesh, for your interesting presentation and a summary of your preliminary results. So I have one observation and one question. And my observation is that if civil society in the land commissions comprise public councils, NGOs, and entrepreneurs, and we know that entrepreneurs like Atomican are very closely linked to the interests of the state. And we know that public councils have been, let's say, less than successful. How useful is that as a mechanism to represent civil society? So that's my, yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, I think this was observation, and the question was?
The question was, how useful is that as a mechanism for representing civil society as a, if you like, a composite body?
Yes, first of all, yes, thank you so much. This observation is absolutely correct. And this problem was pointed out by the heads of the land departments. they also mentioned this problem that, you know, the civil society engagement shouldn't be formal, you know, and that to some extent, yes, it's not a secret, but to some extent, some actors, they're representing more kind of pro-government agenda and not more closer to the state authorities rather than to the population. And in terms of the mechanisms, that is why all experts, they mentioned this problem that, you know, currently this civil society component shouldn't be represented by some random people. And the problem here is not that they don't want to represent the interest of local population, because I interviewed also a representative of Chamber of Entrepreneurs, and sometimes what we hear in media and how they're working in reality could be a bit different, because at the end of the day, much depends from each individual. And but you're absolutely right that this mechanism, as it is working now in terms of civil society representatives engagement, is not working. And here's the main problem. And that is why, you know, that land governance is not separate from the overall governance system. And here we again return to the question how well civil society in general is presented in the governance system, how it's picked up. And for instance, all the actors that you have mentioned, NGOs, they have their own mandates and own interests to some extent. The same could be said about any actor. And that is why it's important to pay attention to professional collection. I mean, like that the civil society component should be comprised of professionals, land surveyors, people who understand all these mechanisms related to legal land tenure regimes and different other problems. And here, while conducting interviews, I see that we have an extreme lack of experts in land governance. And I should say also to you that the response rate is low because people even find this topic related to land governance a bit sensitive. So yeah, this is why I think it's crucial to pay attention exactly to this dimension of land governance, I think.
May I just ask a quick supplementary question, if I may, and I don't wish to monopolize this, but one of your early findings was that civil society is not fully representing local views. Now, I have a kind of passing familiarity with civil society literature, and that is a common finding about civil society, that they don't, in a sense, represent the views of local people. So in terms of your work, what would you suggest? What potentially could be a policy recommendation coming out of your work to make civil society more representative of local views?
Yes, I think I will divide your question to two dimensions in terms of academic relevance. You know, since its work is based on PhD thesis and not kind of public policy report, we'll pay more attention to theoretical relevance. But in terms of practical relevance, I understood your question. I think, as I said, it's first of all, it's already a kind of step forward with we're starting to engage with different stakeholders, because previously during the first decade, this land governance system was highly centralized, so we have mentioned with a limited number of stakeholders. And currently, it's already a step forward that we have different stakeholders related to business, agribusiness, farmers unions, different NGOs, academia presented. But in terms of relevance of this work, is that it's important to establish communication and to ask the questions from different stakeholders, because all of them, they mentioned the problem that digitalization, to which we are all hope of land governance, will not bring the expected results unless we don't have this civic control, in particular in contexts like Kazakhstan. And that this civil society component should be comprised from experts, as I have mentioned. And that is why, for instance, I think for our graduate school of public policy is also important to pay attention to some extent to different dimensions related to land governance or municipality, heads of land departments, because most of them, they're lacking essential knowledges. And they mentioned that although they're currently worldwide different indicators measuring land governance effectiveness, they are not quite aware of the different norms. So in terms of policy application, I think it's important to include expert community. But in order to include this expert community, first of all, it's needed to be prepared. We're just lacking specialists. So just briefly.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay, are there any other questions?
Yeah,
Yeah,
from
I have
Maksat.
I have one question.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Akbikesh, for the interesting presentation. I'm more interested in the data about the irrigation areas and the distribution of the lands here in Kazakhstan, because it's quite a sensitive topic. You rightfully mentioned about that. I mean, there are three dimensions which usually concern society in Kazakhstan about the land issues. The first one is the distribution of land between people, because by constitution and by the national legislation, every citizen is entitled to get at least some part of the land where they live, right? So it's guaranteed by the law, but it doesn't work in reality. We all know about that. The second issue is related to the lack of transparency sometimes in understanding who is actually owns lands, and that creates some problems for farmers, because farmers have traditionally used huge land resources in Kazakhstan, but because of the fact that in 1990s we distributed lands and privatized a lot of them, now many farmers are actually experiencing problems with accessing data about the owners of those lands, so that they could come up and negotiate the price and buy them for their own business needs, for their agricultural needs. And the third dimension is more sensitive. It's a distribution and the plans of the rent of the land by the foreigners, right? So it was a huge debate in society, and there was even protests. You know about that. Yeah, it was promised that by the government that it will not be sold or rented for a long time for the foreigners, but still there are continuous debates about it. So I'm thinking about the data, because they've been mentioned many times, not only in Kazakhstan, but pretty much everywhere, that one of the solutions could be not only the relationship with the civil society, because we all know that the collective action doesn't work. And you're absolutely right. We don't know who represents the society, and they might be just a group of people who might be indirectly represent the group of interest, political interests. They not necessarily represent the interests of civil society. And the only solution that is proposed by many e-government scholars here is basically the publication of data. Maybe somebody mentioned that during the interview. So maybe you are planning to include this dimension of your research in your future endeavors. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Kasin. I totally agree with you related to all these three dimensions that you're mentioning. And while interviewing not only national but international experts, I see that this is a problem that are facing many, not even developing, but developed countries. All these issues related to growing land inequalities, difficulty in access to land data. Also, you mentioned this dimension related to external actors. It's a problem of land grabbing by transnational corporations and other foreign actors, in particular in developing countries. Of course, in terms of the data, your question is absolutely right. But this inclusive decision-making in land governance is just one dimension, as you correctly mentioned, in all the system of land governance. And that is why for us as a developing countries, important to study international experience. I should not say that all the international experience is the best one, but at least, for instance, by the land experts, they developed different land governance assessment frameworks. And recently, within the framework of this work, I made a research related to representation of Central Asia in Kazakhstan included in different indices measuring land governance effectiveness. And there you see the different dimensions related to, they measure how open is a particular country in different dimensions, not only inclusive decision-making, but also protection of land right defenders, gender issues, land rights, openness of land data as well. In Kazakhstan, yes, of course, it's a huge problem because not only in land governance, but in general, the lacking of data. But there we see some steps forward. As you see that even the president mentioned this problem related to that, related to space monitoring, establishing land limits, so not only rich and powerful actors could acquire land, but we are moving in this direction. But in general, you're absolutely right that we need to develop this open data infrastructure in land governance. But although, of course, there's some kind of could be resistance from different actors, but in general, I think we should pay attention to this, international indexes measuring land governance effectiveness, because on these indexes, working international experts, so to say best minds, and that is why we can apply it in our context as well. So thank you. Of course, it's just a partial answer, probably, to your question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Akbikesh, thank you for your presentation. And now we're going to move on. And the next presenter is Janerke Kochigit, and she'll present employment and human capital formation in Kazakhstan. So Janerke, you can share your screen and start.
Don't think Janerke is here.
Okay, you're right. And also then Aitan is not here either. So Aliya, you're next. Aliya.
Yeah.
Assubayeva. You can present water security.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for interest coming today on Saturday at 9 a.m. So I think that now we will smoothly move from land governance to water governance in Kazakhstan. My name is Aliya. I am a PhD candidate at GSPP. Today, I would like to present some part of my PhD work, which will be about river basin management and policy implications on water security in Kazakhstan. I hope you see my screen, yes? And hear me well?
Yeah, we can see.
Thank you. So first, let me introduce you the concept of water security. So across the globe, populations face the challenges of growing water scarcity, mainly because of population growth and consequently growing competing demands for water. However, on the other hand, the impact of climate change, which lead to increase of water-related hazards such as floods, droughts, are also impacting. However, water security is not only about water availability. There are different definitions of water security, and I would like to mention the definition provided by Global Water Partnership. So water security at any level, from household to global, means that every person have access to enough safe water at affordable cost to lead a clean, healthy, and productive life while ensuring that the natural environment is protected and enhanced. There are also other definitions, but the literature review revealed the following challenges related with the water security concept. The first one is a conceptualization challenge. Even from this definition, you can see that the concept is complex, it's multidimensional. Moreover, there are different, attempts to identify water security. So there are people use engineering approaches, socioeconomic approaches, modeling approaches. Another challenge is operationalization challenge. Indeed, there are various frameworks, indexes, measurements that try to attempt to assess water security. However, the discussion on operationalization is still ongoing. And probably these two challenges is coming from the third one, that actually water security is context specific and consequently, the definition and water security priorities will be different among regions and even within the country because of the hydrological features, climate, and so on. So as you know, my PhD thesis is about water security in Central Asia. So we conducted extensive literature review and also 2 rounds of Delphi method among regional and international experts in order to identify water security priorities for Central Asian countries. And the results were published in ERL, in regional journals, and also were presented in various conferences. So scholars and practitioners suggested the following water security priorities for Kazakhstan. The first is improvement of river-based management plans. Second is improvement of drinking water use on rural urban areas and improvement of irrigation management for agriculture. Let me briefly mention about water governance in Kazakhstan, which consists of several levels. The first one is the interstate, which is about transboundary rivers, state level, which is about developing water policy and responsible water committee for this. Then we have basin level and territorial one. So you know that the country is divided into 14 regions. However, based on hydrological boundaries, the territory of country is divided into 8 basins. I need to also mention that when we talk about water security, about 44% of surface runoff is formed from neighbor countries, mainly in China, Russia, and Kyrgyzstan. So there is a dependence on surface runoff from neighbor countries. And in this study, the study attempts to explore whether the improvement of river-based management and planning, which was suggested by scholars and practitioners, can strengthen water security in Kazakhstan. In order to study, so I conducted case study based, I chose Balzhan River Basin, which is located in southeast part of the country. And this is one of the densely populated basins. Semi-structured interviews were conducted using this TPCR framework. This is the model for identifying responses to priority needs and consists of 5 key elements. What are the drivers, pressures, state, impact, and response? So interviews were conducted, then they were transcribed, coded, and analyzed with the qualitative in vivo software. And today I'm still in the stage of analysis, but I would like to show you some preliminary results. So a few words about the case study, which is Balzhan River Basin. As you can see on the map, it's in the southeast part of the country. Almaty is located there, Almaty region, part of the Zhambyl region. And so about 3 million population live in this Balzhan River Basin. And it's in this basin, so in Kazakhstan, we have some basins where mainly agriculture is developed, or it could be industry. However, this basin is unique in terms of it's not only about agriculture, but also industrial development or industrial production, but also urbanization is growing because there is an Almaty, which is one of the most attractive city in Kazakhstan, from my opinion, to live and work and enjoy the life. But let me also mention about water code in Kazakhstan. We have it from 2003. So according to which basin management principle is the management of water resources upon their hydrographic features conducted under the distribution of water resources within river basins, lakes, and other water bodies between the administrative territorial units. Overall, a river-based management approach consists like several elements, which is they are river-based organization, river-based council, and river-based management plan. In Kazakhstan, we call them river-based inspectorate, river-based council, and general scheme of integrated water use and protection of water resources. So for those who are very far from, let's say, water world, so when you hear the river-based approach, probably the first which came is about river. However, with this picture, I just wanted to show you that this is not only about river, but it includes where water is formed, where water flows to, includes all tributaries, all water users, not only environment or river. So about the results, so I managed to conduct 17 interviews in Almaty Oblast, and also online via Zoom in August and October of this year. 5 out of 17 interviewees were the members of the Balzhan River Basin Council. And in this table, you can see that interviews were conducted with the representatives of River Basin Inspectorate, Akimat, representatives of industrial water use, agricultural water use, municipal drinking water use. However, I also managed to talk with the representatives of international organizations. It means experts who were involved in developing river basin approach in Kazakhstan. However, also representatives of NGO, university, and research institutes were also interviewed. And with this slide, I just wanted to show you the data analysis, let's say, strategy. So qualitative coding in Vivo software, I used deductive and inductive approaches. By this, I mean that the deductive, since I already had these 5 key elements, drivers, pressure, state, impact. However, during the conversations with experts, new topics also arise. So in Vivo, there is a node hierarchy. Node means is a collection of references on certain topic. So node hierarchy, for example, here in this diagram, you can see the internal circle means parent node, like the 5 key elements. Then there is a child node. For example, if we talk about the state, then it consists of several elements, and one of them is the River Basin Council. And then there was another subcategory that was created. I call them grandchildren node. However, in reality, there is no term like grandchildren node. For example, it could be about examples, challenges, or other categories, for example, regarding the River Basin Council. And in this table, you can see the coding results, preliminary one. So files mean number of respondents, and references means it could be one sentence or sometimes one paragraph. Yeah. So let me briefly mention about these 5 elements of this DPCIR framework. I asked interviewees, so what were the drivers? So river-based management was introduced in the beginning of 2000, so it means already 20 years passed. So what were the drivers of introducing river-based management approach in Kazakhstan? So based on the responses, I just grouped them into three factors, let's say. The first one is the global agenda for MDGs, SDGs, and climate change. Another one is a past dependency from the Soviet Union. So experts said that river-based management is not new for Kazakhstan, since in the 1980s, in the USSR, there were already attempts to develop introduce river-based approach, councils, plans. And the third driver, probably one of the most important one, is the international projects and funding, which promoted, financed these reforms like basin councils, basin organizations, and so on. I also asked about pressures. So what are the pressures in this basin? So they mentioned population growth, urbanization, also transboundary river, which is still under discussion about the quantity and quality of this river, and overall everything impact will impact to the Balzhan Lake. However, everything started, experts said that it's probably the change of mind of people, how they need to manage and use water resources. It started from the fact of shrinking the Aral Sea, when water managers, water engineers see how anthropogenic activities may impact water resources and overall ecosystem. So, and then regarding the state, which is, I divided them into 3 main parts, like first about the organization, which is called inspectorate or inspection in Kazakhstan. So according to the water code, there are more than 25 functions of this organization. However, currently they are dealing with these 3 functions, which is issuing of water use permits, regulation of water use, and monitoring protection of water resources. And currently, these organizations is facing the following challenges, such as power and function, coordination issues, data and logistics, and limited human and financial resources. I mentioned earlier that there is a dependency of a surface runoff from neighbor countries. However, interviewers also added that this is a fact, and if we would have weak water governance in country, this may lead to water insecurity in Kazakhstan. This is, of course, oversimplification, but for me, in order to somehow organize all these ideas, I decided to write them in the form of formula. Then regarding the river basin council, so in each basin, there is a council that need to, according to the water code, need to meet twice per year. And these meetings is financed by the government. So among 17 interviewees, 5 were members of this council and 9 were non-members. And so according to water code, this river basin council has, or councils have only advisory on consultative role. And then the question is, so they meet, they discuss, probably they make some recommendations. So what will be after these meetings? So what they recommend something, but do someone implement them? I also asked about this, and what I found out that even though River Basin Council has only advisory role, the actions of this council, at least for this Balzhan basin, led to the protection of the ecosystem in the basin by disallowing the geological surveys, warning about water scarcity among water users and stakeholders. Actually, I need to mention that this the council in this basin is one of the most active. So they invite various stakeholders, water users, in order to solve water problems in this basin. Then, so in this table, I just wanted to show you that when people talk about the challenges of river basin councils, it's not only members of basin council know them. It means that river basin councils is known for also for others, and they also know about their challenges. However, when they asked about their examples, like could you please give me some examples where your recommendations somehow impacted to the society or to the water resources management and so on, they gave me a lot of examples how the meetings of river basin councils help to solve water problems in this basin. And then I also asked about the membership in this council. Well, you know, in the water code, there are different organizations who can be the members. And actually they try to invite all water users, representatives of local akimats, river basin organizations, but non-members of Basin Council mentioned that also probably they need to invite more journalists. There are NGOs, but also more NGOs should be involved in this council. Then what else? They mentioned probably the representatives of university and research institutes probably may also be invited to this council. And then I forgot to tell that so the role of international projects. So now international organizations are investing in these small basin councils. However, when I asked then the interviewees, they said that not everybody is known about this even small basin councils. And this again, another formula for me, against oversimplification, but based on the conversations with the interviews, when they said that River Basin Council, probably the key advantage is about local knowledge or ecological local knowledge, public awareness, and stakeholder engagement is the main function of these councils. And then this is about river basin planning. So in Kazakhstan, we have the general scheme, which is developed on the state level and also for each basin. Regarding the river basin plans, they exist only in 2 basins, and currently they are not legally binding. And with this diagram, I wanted to show how the process of issuing water limits work in Kazakhstan. And then it's about impact. I also asked, so what is the impact of this approach of managing water resource on river basin management approach? And they said that this is about mainly adaptive water governance because of the climate change, which require quick decisions and local knowledge. But then another question about impact was, what if the water resource will be managed based on administrative boundaries? What would be the impact? And then some respondents were very, let's say, they criticized this approach, and they said that river-based management is not a panacea for effective water management because of the poor capacity and lack resources. So it means that in order to let's say, for effective river-based management, capacity building resources are required, and it's also context specific. And about the response, interviewees mainly mentioned that there is a limited political will in solving water issues in Kazakhstan, including improvement of river-based management and planning. And probably one of the main, let's say, another key advantage of this approach, what respondents mentioned, is about building resilience faster in the basin and overall in the country. So this is my final slide. I started with the water security, which is a fundamental for achieving sustainable development and promoting economic well-being, especially in countries sharing transboundary rivers, as Kazakhstan. And what came from the interview is that river-based management could be an operational tool to ensure water security, since it helps to achieve good ecological and chemical status, it promotes trust and cooperation among stakeholders, it promotes and regulates sustainable and efficient use of water, but by engaging local water users in discussion and decision-making. However, river-based management and planning is part of the good governance, which might strengthen water security by achieving sustainable balance between social, economic, and environmental needs for water. Thank you for your attention. I would be glad to answer for your questions.
Okay, Aliya, thank you for the presentation. And now we can have questions. So I see Anar has raised her hand. So Anar, you can ask your question now.
Sorry, I didn't ask a question. I put applaud. It was a great presentation using it.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yeah, Balzhan.
Aliya, thank you very much for your interesting presentation. My question is, we all know that Kazakhstan has some water issues with neighboring countries. So what are the main ways of resolving those issues that are being used currently and that are being considered effective?
Yeah, Balzhan, you know, you raised a very important question. And this is the answer probably will be $1,100, I don't know, dollars answer. Since this question is discussed by many scholars, by international organizations, how to promote cooperation and collaboration between transboundary countries and how to reach agreement with them. Well, everything what we have in Kazakhstan, I mean, agreement with our neighbor countries, they were signed during the in the beginning of 90s or during the Soviet time in terms of water allocation issues. So now it is the stage still continuing. They meet regularly. They try to find common ground or consensus, but the discussion is ongoing, negotiations on transboundary rivers with all our neighbor countries. It could be Russia, China, Kyrgyzstan, or other.
What about using some exchange mechanisms that is sometimes suggested in the literature? I mean, they say that, for example, Kazakhstan could exchange gas or, I don't know, oil for water, something like this. Is it being practiced by Central Asian countries?
You know, Balzhan, it was actually practiced during the USSR, so it is not new. It was in the past. However, now everything is complicated. So since I personally don't participate in these negotiations, I can't answer for your questions what's going on right now. But what I know, it was in the past, but I don't know whether they will use this approach in future.
Okay, Stefanios, you can ask your question.
Thanks, Simeon. Thanks. Like to provoke a bit, to challenge a bit the speaker. Okay, so Aliya, you came out with these drivers, pressures, etc., that somehow you identified throughout the qualitative findings, right? So we know that there is going to be an inherent subjectivity there, right? So you made the grouping, you make the qualifications, and in the end of the day, you somehow judging the analysis. So how can we double check that there is some like research consistency in there? And how can we check that there is some kind of scientific evidence that what you prove to say they are, let's say, not that subjective?
Yeah, thank you, Stefanos, for your question. Well, you know, one of the main drawbacks of qualitative analysis is the subjectivity, and we can't do anything with this. But another advantage of qualitative methods is about in-depth information, which we can't find from reports, from research papers, and so on. So what I can do is, there are already studies about river basin management. So by studies, I mean reports by international organizations which conducted analysis about the river basin management councils and so on. So what I can do is I can compare my findings with theirs, and then my contribution would be, yes, the findings of this study is similar to the reports, or it could be something new. So now I see only comparing with the results of other studies, but I need to think about this.
Good. Thanks.
Okay, Dean Hui, you're
thanks Aliya for that presentation. I'm sorry I can't put my video on. Yeah, I appreciate the emphasis that you are placing on river basin management, right? But at the same time, I noticed that you said that there's lack of political will in dealing with the problem, and then at the same time you say that all issues are contextual. So from your presentation, I mean, maybe you have done it elsewhere, but I don't see the motivation for this study. Okay, you're looking at this particular basin in Almaty area. So what are the issues? What are the pressing issues concerning residents or businesses or organizations in that area, and which leads to the need for river basin management and good governance in that area. And also when you the things which are good to have or nice to have, the things that you need to have, and the things that you must have. So I don't see what is the pressing need that drives the study that you are looking at. And also, of course, in interviewing some of the council members, I mean, to what extent do they appreciate the problems that they're facing? And that will then determine the responses that they give to you. Are they knowledgeable about the issues, the pressing issues in that particular area? Yeah.
Thank you, Dean, for your questions and for your comments and recommendations. Let me start with the motivation. So motivation to study this area and to study river basin management approach is coming from the literature review and from the surveying international and regional experts, where we asked what is water security in Kazakhstan and how water security in Kazakhstan should be improved or strengthened. And they gave their priorities. So this was coming so this is coming mainly from literature review analysis and from surveying regional and international experts who suggested that in order to improve water security in Kazakhstan, the country should improve river-based management and planning. And then another, I will add also in my thesis, why this basin? So there are 8 basins in Kazakhstan, and one of them is Balzhan basin. And why this one? So I very briefly mentioned that this is one of the densely populated basin. So this is this basin also includes the regions such as Almaty region, Jambul region, which are one of the densely populated, again, sorry for repetition. And then in this basin, we have a Balzhan lake, which is now widely discussed among ecologists, among activists, that probably if we will not do anything, the Balzhan lake will continue the story of the Aral Sea, where all water resources is used for economic activities, let's say, and water is not reaching the Balzhan lake. And the third, probably, let's say, driver or motivation to choose this basin, there is a transboundary river, Aliya, which is shared with China. And in this part of China, where the Aliya River flows, it's now developing very fast, especially irrigated agriculture. And we still don't have agreement about water quantity, water distribution, water quality. So there are a lot of pressures in this basin. Yeah, and probably I will think further about what are the backgrounds of these interviewees and how it will might impact to their suggestions, recommendations. Yeah, I will think about it. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, I don't see other questions. So Aliya, thank you for your presentation. And next we'll move on to presenter Balzhan Serikbayeva, and she will present to you using online focus groups for studying the issue of education job mismatches in Kazakhstan.
Good morning, dear participants of the conference. Let me introduce myself. My name is Balzhan Serikbayeva. I'm a PhD student at the Graduate School of Public Policy. Let me share my presentation. I hope you see my presentation, right? So today I'm going to talk about my experience of conducting online focus groups for studying the issue of education job mismatches in Kazakhstan. So let me tell you about the structure of my presentation. In the introductory part, I'll give a short overview of the focus group method. Then mostly I will be talking about my personal experience of conducting focus groups and tell about the research design of my study, and also share with the lessons that I have learned from my experience. And then I conclude my presentation with some remarks. So, focus group is one of popular qualitative methods of research. Some researchers define them as group interviews, others describe them as group discussions. For example, Hughes and Dumont say that focus groups are in-depth group interviews employing relatively homogeneous groups to provide information on topics specified by the researcher. You also see here some definitions provided by Bryman and Morgan, who emphasize such aspects of focus groups as the interaction among focus group participants that is meant to provide insights and I mean, during interaction within the group, it's assumed that meaning making takes place. Also, you see the definition provided by Kruger, who has written a lot on focus groups. He said that the focus group is a carefully planned discussion intended to obtain perceptions on a defined environment. There are some methodological features of focus groups that are well known and widely discussed in the literature, such as relative homogeneity of the focus group, a typically small size of the group, and the interaction among participants. Also, focus groups, the successful conduct of focus groups requires a skillful moderator, who one of the tasks of whom is to provide, to create a warm, friendly, and comfortable environment in order for focus group participants to freely share their ideas, opinions, and thoughts. So, due to the COVID-19 restrictions, I have used online focus groups. Actually, there are several types of online focus groups, as you see: asynchronous, synchronous groups, and groups in virtual worlds. Asynchronous groups are based on using chat-based technologies when the researcher sends out a discussion thread and and questions that he wants to explore at regular times, and asynchronous online focus groups may last for over a period of time, ranging from hours to days or even weeks. It does not involve a real-time discussion among participants. Groups in virtual worlds, they are based on the participation in virtual on virtual platforms, chat rooms, and other meeting places where people interact through voice chat and typed text. For my study, I have used synchronous focus groups, which means that the interaction between participants occurs in real time through virtual technologies, voice and chat platforms such as Skype or Zoom, video conferencing platforms. So I have decided to use online focus groups also because they have a number of merits. First of all, it's increased convenience for participation on the part of invitees or potential participants, because they remain at their natural, in their places, at their natural locations, and it can be more comfortable for them to participate in such events. Also, online focus groups, they enable researchers to expand the pool of potential participants. For example, to reach out geographically distanced experts or busy individuals, for example, experts or policymakers who have busy schedules. Also, the literature highlights that online focus groups provides a more effective tool for coordination, because the event occurs on the video conferencing platform, for example, and in terms of handling logistics, etc., it's faster, it's easier, and more comfortable. And also, it's related to lower costs compared to traditional face-to-face focus groups, because you just need high-speed internet and focus group participants who can handle virtual interface. So also anonymity and informality of online focus groups lead to the higher degree of openness on the part of participants, and also these built-in tools in virtual technologies, they make the recording of focus group sessions easier. So let me tell you about the research design of my study. I have used the purposive sampling strategy in order to select participants from the segment of the population who are assumed, in my opinion, to have the most information on the research questions I'm exploring. So the online focus group participants included individuals who have an expert opinion about the topic, the fields of the education and labor market policy making and practice. And focus participants were recruited from 3 administrative units of the country: Nur-Sultan, Almaty, and East Kazakhstan, from the following categories of the population: labor market policy makers and experts, scholars and consultants, including NGOs. And the second category, education policy makers, experts, scholars, consultants, including NGOs, then university instructors and university employment officers, then college instructors, deputy directors of academic affairs and work study issues, and finally representatives of public and private sector organizations and HR agencies. So the procedures that I conducted include sending out invitation letters to potential participants, participants, then obtaining their informed written consent, informed consent from those who agreed to participate, and the video recording of each session, and also putting in place all appropriate privacy and confidentiality protections. So each focus group lasted for about an hour and held through the Zoom video conferencing platform. So what lessons have I learned from my experience? First of all, I should advise to effectively manage your time, because conducting focus groups is a little bit time consuming, because it involves a number of procedures. Sending out first of all, before sending out invitations, still looking at the sampling frame of the population, and then selecting potential participants, and then sending out invitations, and then obtaining consents from those who agreed to participate, and explaining them the motivation of the study, and answering their questions, and sending them Zoom links. I mean, it's a time consuming, but it's well worth the time and efforts that the researcher invests into this undertaking. So, and also one point just I would like to mention is that one had better not arrange the focus group too much ahead of time. It's my personal lesson, because people are very busy. They have their daily routine, their schedules already fixed, and so you tell them with your personal request, and they need to adjust your request. And I have had several occasions when I elicited, I received their consent to participate, but those participants made last-minute adjustments, and they had they did have to not to participate in the focus group because of new changes in their schedules, time constraints, etc., because of unexpected circumstances. So the second lesson is that a researcher needs building up his organizational and moderator skills. So a researcher needs to be balanced, have a good sense of time. He should be flexible and quicker, and effective in all respects. Because for a simple example, for example, some participants who have already confirmed their participation, they may just forget about their about this event focus group, and the researcher should log into the platform ahead of time and have control of everything. And if participants are late to joining, then make a quick phone calls and etc. You should be effective in all respects. And then successful focus groups requires skillful moderators, because a lot depends on moderator skills, how his abilities to manage the group dynamics, to note emerging topics, to involve shy participants. To manage the discussion. But at the same time, it should be balanced. It should not be too intrusive and structured. But meanwhile, you should ensure that all the research questions that you are exploring, they should be discussed in full by focus group participants. Also, another important point is that you should be mentally prepared, because for researchers who are new to the field of doing field research, it can be perceived emotionally challenging to conduct focus groups, because you call unknown people to make the personal request to them, and they need, of course, they don't anticipate such kind of request upon answering the phone, and that's why my advice is not to be discouraged if your response rate is low, maybe low, and some participants may provide you his refusal after having listened to your explanation at some length of the details of the study, because it is well worth, it's a worthwhile endeavor, because it's rewarding. At the end of the day, you'll end up with having received a lot of information, a lot of useful information. So be mentally prepared. Then establishing a rapport with potential participants is very important, and you should do this from the very beginning. Keep this in mind, because in our society, I think this is particularly important. People may have some suspicion or distrust. So the task of the moderator is to assure confidentiality and to put potential participants at ease, explain the details of the study, explain that all the protections, confidentiality and anonymity protections are in place. And to ensure, so establishing a rapport is very important. And this point is related to handling ethical considerations. So you should stress in your written informed consent form and at the beginning of the online focus group session that all ethical considerations are handled, all protections are in place, that no personal information about persons and individuals and organizations will be in final research documents. And also my last point is advice is to over-invite focus group participants because you know that unexpected things happen all the time, and that's why if, for example, you have ensured the agreement of 10 or 11 focus participants, you may end up of only 6 or 7 participants showing up for your online focus group session. So this is just some of the lessons that I have gained from my personal experience. So concluding remarks, I'm going to present the major findings of my study during the midterm presentation in November. But meanwhile, I would like to note that the study of education job mismatches is highly important and necessary, and this is what the majority of the focus group participants have highlighted, and thanked for having organized the focus group sessions on such an important topic. And but you know that the labor market is a very dynamic place, and as noted by some labor market, as the focus group participants, things change very quickly, and new professions arise, and even, for example, we don't have, for example, the government is trying to introduce changes into professional standards, but meanwhile the professions themselves may undergo some changes. So that's why, for example, on the part of the labor market experts, employers, and the HR representatives, it was highlighted that many concerns are related to the, low level of maybe low capacity, to a relatively lower capacity of our educational system to provide demanded specialists and professionals, while on the side, on the part of educational experts, it was highlighted that it is these industry establishments, employers who should engage more, and inform educational institutions about their requirements and take part and increase their participation, for example, in the elaboration of some academic documents, etc. So here I have observed clearly that there is a need, there is a huge need to align the needs and requirements, the interests of both sides, and joint effective work is required. So overall, online focus groups have provided multiple perspectives of experts and useful insights into the topic, and quite a lot of useful policy prescriptions from the participants. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you for your presentation, Balzhan. And now we'll move on to questions. So I see that Maksat has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Balzhan, for your interesting presentation. Yeah, my question is more like a comment, maybe a recommendation. So as far as I understand, you're Balzhan at an active stage of collecting primary data, right, for your research. Yeah. So as you rightly mentioned in your description of the methodology of the focus group studies, I mean, focus group studies is quite a powerful instrument to collect primary data for qualitative research, but you need to be a bit careful with the other side of focus group studies, because respondents could be quite biased. I mean, you're already going into the gray area, because by choosing people from one area, from one industry, they already focus on one topic. So there is a huge potential for the biased information that we get. Understandably, any research that is related to getting primary data within the ground theory, so you're going to the unknown territory and you're getting new information, right? But the results of focus group studies are usually supportive for certain data that you get from other resources. In most of the cases, those resources, they are secondary. I mean, what I would recommend you to is to look at this statistical data that you get from secondary sources. You couldn't get yourself, because it would require huge efforts from you, and usually organizations with enough resources, administrative, financial, human resources, they could do that. So I don't know, maybe you already contacted Sayasat Nurbek. I mean, and his team is doing a great job in that area, so you probably could contact him to get statistical data. Also, you mentioned NGOs and education institutions. One more recommendation probably would be if you will contact both public and private institutions, education institutions, universities and institutes, who almost all of them have special departments where they try to connect their graduates with certain industries, companies. So many universities, so it will be one dimension where you could get some statistical data which you don't need to collect yourself, right? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Kasen, for your kind suggestions and recommendations. So I have conducted about I mean, I think a sufficient number of focus groups up to now. The matter is that I would like just to comment on your suggestions and recommendations. The matter is that my thesis will include also a description of the state of affairs in the fields of labor market and education. It's taken for granted because I should provide what kind of issues do we have right now in these fields, and these focus groups, you know, these are they have provided me a lot of a large amount of information that are ready to be analyzed right now. And you know, the literature recommends using more or less homogeneous groups. But at the same time, researchers suggest that some variation needs to be employed. So, in order to have substantive, meaningful discussions, of course, I ensured some variation among the participants of my focus groups. So, I think I have had a very interesting, substantive focus sessions, and what I would like to note is that at some point I met very enthusiastic people who were very glad to share their opinions, their experience, their thoughts. I mean, it's very encouraging. I mean, these focus group participants are those people who have knowledge and some experience about the topic. And concerning the participation of Serikbayeva Nurbek, as far as I know, his organization deals with the elaboration of the professional matters, something like this. They make focus of what kind of professions will be in need, for example, in a 10-year period, or I don't know, in the short time, or within a long time period, right? So actually, personally, I don't think that the results may be biased. Of course, I cannot guarantee that there cannot be any bias at all. But I don't think that the results of the focus group sessions will suffer from bias. Why? Because these experts were from various fields, and from 3 locations, and I ensured the variation. And in most cases, these experts, they didn't know each other, and there was a good interaction. I mean, but at the same time, I felt my responsibility that I should be an effective moderator, and I had all the research agenda covered by the discussion. Of course, in my thesis, I will include the analysis of statistical data, of the descriptive information about the state of affairs on the topic. Over 50 participants have participated in the focus group sessions, and 2 months have been spent, and I worked 4 days per week, full days. I just was sitting on this work, and it was very engaging, challenging, but at the same time, it was rewarding. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, then we have a question from Professor Knox.
Yes, thank you very much, Balzhan, for your interesting presentation. One of the things that focus group experts tell us is that they place a lot of store on interaction, body language, interaction between participants, and that often provides cues for the moderator. So my question is, do you think online interviews lose that kind of interaction effect? And the second question is, you mentioned, and this is very common, that you gather a lot of information in focus groups. How did you capture that, and how will you analyze it? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Knox. I think, first of all, a moderator needs to have the discipline of carefully observing and listening to focus group participants to what they say and to their nonverbal gestures, etc. For example, this nonverbal language communication may provide a lot of useful information. That's what is emphasized in the literature. So according to my research design, I have video recorded of the focus group sessions, and before conducting them, I had practiced. I had watched some online focus group sessions, some YouTube videos, how the moderators behaved, how they, for example, interfered with their clarifying questions, how they worded, for example, non-active participants, etc. So it was a great learning experience for me, and I think that I had the chance of having another look at my videos. And yes, I have collected a lot of information, but I haven't yet started the analysis of the data. This is to be started next week. Now, I'm just thinking about the coding categories that I'll be assigning. So I think according to the methodology, it will be it will take some time and efforts, but I think it will be engaging and interesting. Thank you.
Okay, but Balzhan, I also have a question I want to ask you. Did you get a lot of very different answers from these focus groups you conducted, or were the answers very similar and they could be summarized easily?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Professor Nanovsky, for your question. Now, even not re-listening my videos, I can say that I can clearly observe some patterns in the focus group participants' ideas, thoughts, responses. So I think that I can easily identify the major themes, categories. But at the same time, since my focus group discussion involves participants from two different fields, education and labor market, so there can be some contrary, some controversial thoughts, etc. But I think I'll handle to provide an objective analysis on my part. Thank you.
Okay, Balzhan, thank you. Are there any more questions? Okay, if there is no more questions, I think this.
I want to